Alright guys, welcome back to YoSpill, and in tonight's video, it's the video you guys have all been waiting for. I've posted a little bit of pictures online of my daily driven juke, called juke bait, that I finally blew up after 150,000 miles of abuse. Yeah, she finally broke. So, I find it very funny that most people know me for the juke. I've had some pretty interesting builds. I've done all kinds of stuff with Hondas. Um, and the car I'm most known for is my crossover I bought when I was moving into a house so I could throw stuff in it. Um, Very interesting, but it is also a very interesting car, has a very interesting following, and has very small aftermarket support. So there's not very many companies that support them. So without much more talking, I'm going to flip the camera around. I'm going to show you everything that broke. I'm going to give you a little backstory on the juke and then explain the goal and what we're going after in the future process with my 2013 Nissan Nismo Juke. Well, guys, this is what juke bait has came down to. There's her front end. There she is, completely ripped apart, disassembled. No drive line at all. You see shift bushings. You can see the downpipe, which I need to upgrade to a 3-inch one. And you can see the subframe and everything. Here's the old motor. Here is the new donor motor. That's the old transmission. That's the new donor transmission. There is the old cylinder head, which is the only thing actually savable off of this mess right here. There is the old turbo that came off. No, there's the old turbo that came off of it. There's my donor turbo, and then there is my turbo bay. And there is chunks of the block. There is an oil chain. There is the oil pump that got ripped off the block. There is what caused all this damage. That is piston number 1 from the motor. If you're on the motor mount side, you can see the block right there. Didn't make it through it. It windowed that side of the block. It also windowed this side of the block. It destroyed the crankshaft. That girdle is supposed to go all the way across here, come over and come across here. It also destroyed that. It wasn't tune related. The bearings look perfect. The cylinder head, it's flawless. The head gasket wasn't blown. Nothing was blown. The cams look great. It had phenomenal oil pressure. The turbo has definitely ate something at one point in its life. You can see the blades there are all chipped and missing. The blades should be perfectly square like that. And then, of course, this transmission has lived a hard life. If you've watched any of the racing footage of me racing the Juke, you know I no-lift shift this thing, and I'm not very nice to it. So we'll go into a story time, and we'll start the story with why'd we even get the Juke in the first place, how it all started, and how we ended up with the record for the fastest Nissan Juke MR16, and why nobody has really beat it. So, it was about 6 years ago, I believe. 6 or 7 years ago. I was looking for a daily driver. I was actually daily driving a fully built G22 IT-Bead CB7 Accord, which is a 93 Accord if you don't know what that is. And I was moving into a house, and I wanted something more fuel efficient, something I could daily drive, and I had just got a small dog, which is my dog Lou, if you see him in the background of some of the videos. So I wanted something I could throw the dog in, and my brother had bought a Fiat 500 Turbo, and I liked it. It was small motor, stick shift, and fun to drive. I found one of these online, thought it was interesting just because of the weird looks it has, which is another reason why a lot of people hate it, because they think it's ugly. And the car's appearance to me doesn't matter. I like how a car drives, I like how a car feels, and a car that gives somebody a good reaction. So when people online see a Juke or something that is a very oddball setup, like my Spirit RT or anything like that, and you're out there racing cars that shouldn't even be in the same realm as it, it gives people a very, very funny reaction most times. So, I was actually looking at a CTSV, which is pretty funny. It was pearl white, just like this. It had a blower recall, and the pricing was, of course, more than a juke. And I could have afforded it if I really wanted to, but I was moving into a house, so I didn't want a really crazy car payment. So, of course, picked the Nissan. It was a phenomenal car for the first 15 or 18,000 miles. I bought it used. It was a 13. And it only had, I think, 18 to 15,000 miles on it. It had really low miles. It was from Hawaii. Some kid in the military owned it, and he shipped it back with him and traded it into a Chrysler dealership and got himself a Scat Pack or a Hellcat. I don't remember exactly which one it was, but he got himself a Hellcat Scat Pack. So I got it, drove it around stock for about, knowing me, it was only like a week. Then I bought an exhaust for it. I bought an intake for it. I got the intercooler piping for it and the downpipe and midpipe, which deletes the cats, which you can see right there. That is the downpipe on a Nissan Juke from 2J Racing. That is the midpipe. Mine does not look like all the other ones you'll see online because mine has been welded back together about 5 times. From me launching this thing so hard, I ripped that billow tube in half. And I made my midpipe completely 3-inch, so it matches my full 3-inch stainless steel exhaust. So that is mods I don't know if I've ever talked about, but they have. So, these cars also have this weird, crazy dual mass flywheel. This thing altogether is like 60 pounds. It's ridiculous. That will be getting deleted. I do have a single mass and a FX350 HD. So, right as soon as I did my intake exhaust and intercooler, I got this car tuned by 2J Racing in Georgia. Shout out Joe from 2J. I drove it all the way up there. It was like a 9-hour drive. We never actually got to dyno it. He had technical difficulties with his dyno. His actual computer that ran his dyno broke that day. So we street tuned this thing on 19 pounds of boost, and the clutch started slipping. So we stopped right there. We didn't proceed to, beat on it or anything. We put it back on the dyno and used a roller just to do some bass tuning with a little bit less boost. So I know I've had a lot of criticism, people thinking that I have like some crazy tune or anything. This thing has literally had that exact street tune by Joe for the last 6 years. And I have changed downpipe because, of course, it broke. I made the midpipe 3-inch. I did a full race front mount and everything. But when I raced this car and went 13.61 at 200 or 103 miles an hour or whatever, which is a current standing juke record, this car only had intercooler pipes, a turbo smart blow-off valve, an exhaust, and a engine intake. There was nothing else done to it. It didn't have intercooler upgrade, nothing. I would make one pass, the intercooler would be so heat soaked that the car would lose like 40 or 50 wheel horsepower, so I'd have to let it cool down in between rounds. You would see me pushing it around with the hood open, letting the car cool down, because the stock little turbo doesn't like that very much. So, that is how I ended up having the fastest Nissan Juke record. Now, it's been 5+ years. There's a lot more people building Jukes now. There's actually a decent-sized community for the Juke. I know a lot of people don't think there is, but there actually is a decent-sized community. And now there's a lot of aftermarket parts. When I first bought this, there was no pistons. There was no rods for sale. There was no aftermarket turbos for sale. Everything was literally stock stuff. And then Mamba came out with the turbo, and Juke started making 300 wheel. The standing record for a stock motor, obviously not this broken stock motor, but a stock motor has made 460 wheel horsepower stock with a bolt-on GT28 using an adapter plate and hooking it to the stock exhaust manifold, which was also tuned by Joe at 2J Racing. So that is the record for a stock motor. Now, there's people that have built motors and make less power than that. They have really bad power bands because they use really big turbos, and they have all went slower at the track than this car. The car that made all that power, there's a video of him racing like a Hellcat online and pulling on a Hellcat. That car is obviously faster than this car, but he has never taken it to the drag strip because he knows it's probably going to break the transmission if he launches it hard enough. That's a lot of power for a stock little 6-speed Nissan transmission. So the record that I set when this car was literally just intake and exhaust has been standing for almost 5 years now. That's kind of the reason why I don't think anyone's really tried to break it. The built motor guys have problems because they can't get it to leave. And then once they do get it to leave, the car gets all squirrely because it makes too much top end power. Doesn't really have a good mid range, or the turbo's oversized, or driving. There's a lot of things involved with drag racing. So that creates a problem. Obviously, we need to know why it blew up. Well, that happened. The piston or rod broke. This thing has been turned up to 19 pounds of boost since, I think, 25,000 miles. And I have 150,000 miles on this car. Like, that is incredible. If you guys watch how I drive this thing, I autocross it, I drag race it, I beat the crap out of this car. And it has lasted me 150,000 miles in literally almost 6 years. I am not mad at this motor. I understand it blew up. Don't even care at this point that it blew up. Now, what are we going to do to remedy my blown up motor? Well, we have another motor right here, and we have another transmission right there, and we have a donor 2013 Nissan Juke outside that I got from a guy that bought it from Copart that was in a flood, and they stole the front end. I don't need the front end, didn't care about the front end, but I do have a whole new interior and everything that's in that car that's in way better condition than mine because, of course, mine has been abused for 150,000 miles. My donor Juke only has 80,000 miles on it. So this motor only has 80,000 miles on it. This transmission obviously was in water, but only has 80,000 miles on it. It is not going to go in this Juke bone stock. I did order pistons, rods, and a head gasket for this motor. I do not plan on that ever happening again to this motor. And also, like I said, that clutch is not going in there. I'm not using a stock clutch. This car will have an FX350 HD, and it will have a single mass conversion flywheel, which saves around 30 pounds of total rotating mass, which, if you know anything about cars, that means it will spin very fast. Now, to the turbo situation. Obviously, the stock turbo, that little guy right there, here for reference, my little finger, you can literally cover the whole turbo with just half of my finger. Obviously, this turbo was designed for low-end and mid-range torque. It was not designed for high-end power. The factory Jukes rev to like 6,500 RPMs is where they pretty much quit making power. At 19 pounds of boost, this turbo was spinning its dear life away. It would not make any more power after like 22 PSI. It's known in the Juke community that these stock turbos do not make power after 22 PSI. And if you try to turn them up to like 25 PSI, they're known for flying apart and leaking oil like crazy. So obviously, we had to fix that problem. This is the video I made years back when I bought this thing originally. That is my Turbo Bay Stage 3R 51X. He has created a bigger version of this turbo already. Now, I'm going to send one of these off to get it upgraded for the bigger version, but I want to start out with this turbo that I've had originally for the whole time, just so I can set a new record for the Juke for a big wheel stalker turbo is what I call them. So it's the stock frame, stock turbo. Literally, it's just a ported inside. It's no aftermarket turbo, no aftermarket exhaust manifold, none of that. So this will still be a very stock appearing Juke from the outside. You will not know that there's an aftermarket turbo because it's not. It's a stock turbo that the center has been machined, and it makes a good bit more airflow than, of course, this little guy. I think these measure in at 30, I think they're 37 millimeter total, and that is a 51. You can see the clear comparison right there. I do have an extra cylinder head. I might get it ported, do a valve job, and change it later if I can't get the record that I want to get. I do plan on putting the Nissan Juke into the 12-second range, which I don't think it will be very hard with my driving, a good clutch, and a good turbo. I have no problem seeing a Nissan Juke in the 12s very easily. Now, of course, I ordered parts for this. Parts don't show up right away. There's, back order on parts and stuff like that. Joe sent me everything he has. I'm going to have to work on getting head studs and head bolts and a new timing chain and bearings and stuff. But that is the goal for my Nismo Juke. My goal when I'm done with this thing is to still have AC, to still have power steering, not destroy the car in any way. No hood exit exhaust, no fender exit exhaust. I want to have a full exhaust. The way I drive it on the street, be able to go to the track, bolt my slicks on, go 12s, and drive it home without any problems. I know that sounds crazy that we're trying to build a 12-second Nissan Juke, but like I said, many of people have tried to go faster than my 13.6, which I did with just intake and exhaust, and they haven't succeeded. Now I have a reason to actually try to make it go faster because I knew that was kind of the limit of the stock turbo. Now there are other big wheel stocker MR16s. A friend of mine in Orlando has a Sentra with a V2 motor that has a big wheel stocker on it, and he has been 1330 at 106. So I only could get 102.9 or 103 miles an hour out of this thing with it at 2,600 pounds. He, with his car gutted, pretty much similar to how I had mine gutted, got 106 miles an hour out of it. And his car is, I think, only low, like, I think it's like 305 horsepower or something like that. It doesn't make a lot of horsepower. But he has been faster than me. So I don't technically have the fastest MR16. I do have the fastest Nissan Juke record. Not the Juke R all-wheel drive. Like, that thing doesn't exist. It's not an actual title car where you can buy it and drive it on the road. That's like a demonstration only car. But as a front wheel drive Nissan Juke, I still have the record. And I plan to push that record into the 12s. And I have a donor motor. Obviously, you can see all the damage. This one is going in the trash. There's a timing chain that exploded as well, which these motors are known for. The oil pump exploded. So none of this is salvageable. Literally all of this can go straight in the trash. Transmission, definitely keeping for gear sets because the MR16 V2 guys, the Sentra guys, have problems with breaking gears and stuff when they start turning them up. Cylinder head, just in case anything happens. Camshafts, might send them out to see about regrinds. Don't really know yet. Turbo I already have. So once I get the parts, I'll make you guys the next video. And we'll have this motor on an engine stand. We'll be inside of it, hopefully putting pistons and rods in it and putting it back together to go in this thing and go after a 12-second record. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. It's all talking, I know, but at least you got to see the destruction of what happens when you give me a stock motor and a lot of boost. Till the next one, have a great night.